Jake stood in front of his sleek, full-length mirror, adjusting the collar of his tailored suit. Tomorrow evening was the highly anticipated corporate gala, an event that would bring together some of the biggest names in the industry. As a newly promoted executive at Caldwell Enterprises, Jake had big plans to impress everyone, particularly the elusive CEO, Mr. Caldwell, who was rumored to be attending in person. Maya sat quietly on the couch, flipping through a magazine. She had asked Jake earlier if she should pick out a dress for the event, but he had mumbled something about maybe attending on his own. It wasn't the first time he hesitated to include her in his corporate affairs. While Maya was supportive, Jake sometimes found her a bit too ordinary for such a high-profile environment. That evening, as Maya tried to offer her help, maybe pick out a matching tie, Jake tried to change the topic. He claimed the gala was mostly for internal staff and that plus ones wouldn't be much of a thing. A small part of him knew this was a lie, but he reasoned that he only wanted to protect Maya from the glitzy chaos and potential judgment of his more superficial colleagues. Deep down, Jake was worried. Would Maya fit in with the polished, high-society crowd? He brushed aside his guilt, deciding that leaving her out was the best choice. After all, he told himself, this was about his career trajectory, and that had to come first. Maya sighed, folding the magazine on her lap. Jake, if it's employees only, that's fine. I'll just stay home, she said with a kind smile. Her voice had that gentle tone he adored, and it gave him a brief moment of doubt. He wanted to say something reassuring but instead just nodded vaguely. His mind spun, envisioning the grandeur of the gala, the chance to mingle with top executives. This would be his moment to shine, and he didn't want any distractions. Maya returned her gaze to the magazine, while Jake resumed checking his reflection. Even if it felt wrong, he was determined not to jeopardize this opportunity. The next morning, while sipping his coffee, Jake finalized his excuses. The corporate gala, he insisted to Maya, was employees only. He gave a sheepish smile, adding that the event was going to be strictly business, and guests wouldn't be permitted. Maya, trusting him, simply nodded. She even offered a relieved chuckle, saying she wouldn't really know how to mingle in such a formal setting. Jake felt a pang of guilt. Maya was bright, charming, and possessed a quiet confidence. However, in the status-obsessed world he inhabited, he worried her simple fashion sense and introverted demeanor wouldn't shine. He wanted to be seen as a formidable figure, someone who surrounded himself with success. A nagging voice in his head told him he was making a mistake, but he pushed that aside. Later, at the office, he ran into Sophia, an ambitious coworker with a reputation for turning heads. She was discussing the gala with a few colleagues when Jake approached. Sophia made sure to let everyone know she had a dazzling new dress. With a sly grin, she hinted she didn't have a date yet. Jake's mind churned. Bringing Sophia would undoubtedly command attention. Perhaps Mr. Caldwell would see him as someone who resonated with the company's upscale vibe. In a spur-of-the-moment decision, Jake invited Sophia to accompany him. Her eyes lit up. She agreed without hesitation. Jake tried not to think about how this would look to Maya. For once, he told himself, he deserved to have fun. That evening, he returned home and casually mentioned having to leave early for the gala. Maya smiled from the couch, telling him to have a great time. He swallowed hard, feeling an inexplicable knot in his stomach. Yet his ambition overrode the guilt. If the night went as planned, he might secure a higher rung on the corporate ladder. He ignored the disquiet in his heart and prepared for the biggest night of his budding career. The evening of the gala arrived quickly. Jake arrived at the luxurious event hall arm-in-arm with Sophia, whose glittering gown drew admiring stares. The floor was polished marble, and crystal chandeliers cast prisms of light across the guests. Servers navigated the crowd offering champagne flutes, and a low hum of conversation filled the air. Jake's boss, an imposing figure named Martin, was the first to approach them. "You clean up well, Jake," Martin teased, clapping him on the back. Then, his gaze drifted to Sophia. "And who might this be?" Jake hesitated for a moment before replying, "Sophia. She's a colleague." We, thought we'd attend together. He felt a twinge of shame but forced it down. Martin raised a brow, intrigued but not suspicious. As the trio wandered over to a high table, Martin asked, "So, Jake, who's this girlfriend you always mention? Didn't you say she was a big support in your life?" Jake, feeling cornered, forced a laugh. "Oh, Maya? She's not exactly the gala type. She'd probably get bored or overwhelmed by all of this. She's more basic, I guess." Jake winced internally at his own words. Sophia smirked, swirling the champagne in her glass. Martin nodded politely, but there was a flicker of disapproval in his eyes. Jake, however, was too focused on maintaining his image to care. He brushed it off as harmless banter, never suspecting how those careless words would come back to haunt him by the end of the night. His attention was soon drawn to the majestic decorations, the luxurious buffet, and the promise of meeting the top brass. Meanwhile, somewhere in the background, rumors of his belittling comment began to circulate among those who overheard. Jake, swayed by the grandeur of his surroundings, didn't give it a second thought. Amid the soft hum of music and clinking glasses, Jake found himself at ease, charmed by the grandeur. He spotted members of the board, heads of various departments, and even lesser-known celebrities sprinkled throughout the crowd. All of this bolstered his confidence. Having Sophia by his side made him feel like a winner, someone who belonged at the center of the corporate world. Then it happened. Conversation hushed near the grand entrance, drawing everyone's gaze. A woman stepped into the room with an air of quiet authority. Her evening gown flowed elegantly, and the poise in her posture demanded respect. For a moment, Jake couldn't quite see her face amidst the lights. Martin, who had been rattling on about quarterly results, abruptly stopped. "Who is that?" he whispered. Even Sophia craned her neck to get a better look. As the woman moved closer, the crowd seemed to part. Her makeup was tastefully done, her hair pinned in a sophisticated style, and she walked like someone who felt entirely at home among industry giants. When Jake finally caught a clear glimpse, his heart plummeted. It was Maya. Stunned, he watched as she exchanged polite greetings with guests in her path. Jake felt his stomach knot with dread. What was she doing here, and how had she gotten an invitation? Before he could react, Maya locked eyes with him from across the room. For a split second, neither of them moved. Then Maya broke the gaze, accepting a handshake from another executive. Jake's pulse raced. His carefully fabricated lie about the event being employees only crumbled in an instant. Sophia, sensing his distress, touched his arm. "Jake, do you know her?" He gave a small nod, not trusting himself to speak. The hush that fell over them was charged with questions. At first, Jake hoped Maya was just passing by, maybe a coincidence. But the way she carried herself suggested she wasn't an outsider at all. Mr. Caldwell, the reclusive CEO who rarely made public appearances, had just arrived moments before. He looked around the room, flanked by a few directors. As soon as he spotted Maya, his expression shifted from reserved politeness to something resembling genuine warmth. Jake blinked, trying to recall if he'd ever seen Mr. Caldwell look anything but stoic. The CEO excused himself from a conversation, then took long strides toward Maya. The crowd seemed to hold its breath as the two exchanged greetings. From the angle where Jake stood, he couldn't quite hear what was being said. But the way Mr. Caldwell seemed almost deferential to Maya left him reeling. Martin, too, looked perplexed. "Is that your girlfriend?" he asked quietly. "Why is Caldwell acting like he knows her personally?" Jake could only mutter, I'm not sure." Sophia's nails dug into his arm. She was as confused as he was. Suddenly, a wave of murmurs spread through the crowd. People whispered about who this mysterious woman might be. Maya, with a gracious smile, introduced herself to other high-ranking officials as Mr. Caldwell's conversation partner. Their body language was respectful, if not outright familiar. And just like that, the power dynamic in the room subtly changed. Jake felt a cold sweat. He remembered his earlier words, calling Maya basic. Now, it appeared she was anything but. Fear coiled in his gut, and he saw Martin glance at him pointedly. The boss was clearly unimpressed that Jake had dismissed someone who seemed so significant. Jake swallowed hard, realizing he was walking on thin ice. If Maya was on speaking terms with Mr. Caldwell, what else might she have been hiding from him? Jake's mind raced, recalling snippets of Maya's past she'd briefly mentioned. She'd talked about an interest in tech startups, once confided in him about a project she was working on. He never paid too much attention, focusing instead on his own climb. Now, seeing Maya center stage with Mr. Caldwell, a painful realization dawned on him. He hardly knew the true depth of her capabilities. In a sudden flashback, he remembered the night he found her up late, coding on her laptop. She'd been excited about a small app idea. He'd teased her for playing with code, assuming it was just a hobby. Little did he suspect that she was, in fact, collaborating with significant players in the industry. He also recalled the time she mentioned being invited to a pitch meeting. Jake had been too busy boasting about his own job to ask more. Now the puzzle pieces snapped into place. Perhaps Maya had played a bigger role in the company than he ever realized, maybe even as an investor or strategic partner. All those moments he brushed her off, thinking she was just shy, or that her interests were mere pastimes, now weighed on him. He stood there, heart pounding, wishing he had listened more closely. If she was indeed a silent partner, or held some influential stake in Caldwell Enterprises, it would mean she had been supporting his work environment from behind the scenes, all while he downplayed her significance at every turn. The memory of Maya patiently explaining the basics of her tech project surfaced. He had barely heard her, nodding absently while checking his phone. Now, confronted with the reality of her influence, he realized how blind he had been. The woman he'd sidelined to look cool was someone extraordinary, someone who commanded respect at the highest levels of his own company. While Mr. Caldwell chatted amicably with Maya at the far side of the ballroom, the rest of the attendees erupted into hushed speculations. Jake could see small clusters of people glancing their way, whispering behind raised hands. He felt tension creeping up his spine. Sophia's eyes narrowed, frustration simmering beneath her composed facade. She leaned over to Jake. What exactly does she do? Why is she here with the CEO? Jake swallowed hard. I'm still figuring that out, he admitted. The honesty of that statement stung. He should have known this about his own girlfriend. Across the room, Martin sidled up to a board member who seemed to know something. The board member shook his head in disbelief, then let slip a few startling bits of information. Words like angel investor and tech partnership drifted through the air. The rumor was that Maya had played a pivotal role in a software integration project that saved Caldwell Enterprises millions. Jake looked down at his champagne, his ears burning. He couldn't shake the memory of his earlier conversations with Martin, especially the moment he carelessly labeled Maya as uninteresting. How could he have missed that the quiet woman he shared his life with was making such significant moves? In the corner of the hall, Maya caught Jake's eye momentarily. Her expression was unreadable. Whether it was disappointment, resolve, or something else entirely, he couldn't tell. She turned back to her conversation, and Jake knew nothing would be the same after tonight. The stark contrast between the poised, commanding figure Maya presented to the world and the unassuming girlfriend he'd always pigeonholed gnawed at him. He realized with dread that the night's revelations might only be beginning. Jake felt the room closing in on him. The opulent decor, once so mesmerizing, now felt suffocating. He had to talk to Maya, explain himself, or at least figure out what was happening. But each time he made a move to approach, he hesitated. How would he even begin that conversation? He tried to steel himself, leaving Sophia chatting with a group of accountants. This was something he had to handle alone. With careful steps, he navigated past the curious stares until he finally reached Maya, who was briefly unoccupied. Mr. Caldwell had moved on to greet the next wave of arrivals. Maya, he said softly, voice trembling. Can we talk? She turned, meeting his gaze with a guarded expression. "I see you brought Sophia," she replied, tone polite but distant. She glanced over Jake's shoulder, seeing Sophia laugh loudly at something. Her eyes returned to him with a calm that unnerved him. Jake swallowed. It wasn't what it looked like. I mean, I didn't think you'd want to come. You never told me you had ties to Caldwell Enterprises." Maya tilted her head. "Jake, you never really asked." There was a softness in her voice, but it was overshadowed by a quiet steel. People around them pretended not to listen but hung on every word. Under their combined scrutiny, Jake felt exposed. He reached for Maya's arm gently. She pulled away, and a flicker of hurt flashed in her eyes before she turned and walked off. Jake stood there, paralyzed by a surge of regret. He could sense the stares intensifying. Every second that passed reminded him how deeply he had miscalculated everything about Maya. The walls seemed to close in, and he realized he might not be able to fix this with a simple apology. Chapter 9: Sophia's Jealous Gaze. As Maya walked away, Jake remained rooted to the spot, warring with shame and confusion. Suddenly, Sophia appeared at his side, her voice dripping with disdain. "She sure made an entrance, didn't she?" Jake couldn't muster a response. He watched Maya seamlessly integrate herself into another group, politely shaking hands and exchanging professional nods. A pang of awe and regret coursed through him. She seemed so at ease among top executives. In contrast, he felt like an imposter in his own suit. Sophia let out a soft, mirthless laugh. "She's definitely not just your average girlfriend. You've been hiding quite the secret. Or maybe you didn't even know." The question was laced with sarcasm. Jake's jaw tightened. I'm as surprised as you are," he admitted. "Look, Sophia, let's not make a scene here." Her eyes flickered with jealousy. "A scene? I'm only stating the obvious. She's overshadowing everything tonight. You know what that does to people's perception of you, right?" He had no words. He could sense the tension in the air. Some were reveling in the drama, while others pitted him. The mask Jake had worn, of the confident, up-and-coming executive, was slipping fast. Sophia gave his arm a squeeze, a twisted attempt at showing support. "So, are we leaving? Or are you going to continue embarrassing yourself?" Jake shook her off, refusing to be manipulated further. The evening was spiraling out of control. A part of him wondered if this was the universe's way of delivering a hard lesson. He realized the line between personal and professional had blurred beyond recognition. Maya was no longer just an afterthought, she was turning into the central figure of the entire event. Just when the atmosphere couldn't get more charged, a poised older woman entered through the side doors. She wore a refined business suit rather than a formal gown, setting her apart from the rest. Her silver hair was styled elegantly, and her presence commanded immediate respect. Heads turned, and whispers followed. "Is that Eleanor? The rumored chairwoman?" Jake felt his heart skip a beat. Eleanor was said to be the silent powerhouse behind Caldwell Enterprises, a major shareholder who rarely surfaced but held enormous sway over company decisions. She scanned the room with an assessing gaze before her eyes landed on Maya. Jake watched, astonished, as Maya greeted Eleanor warmly, an affectionate smile on her face. The two women exchanged a brief hug, and Eleanor's expression softened as she spoke with Maya. Their interaction hinted at a long-standing relationship. For Jake, this was yet another revelation that felt like a punch to the gut. "She's connected to the chairwoman?" Martin whispered in disbelief nearby. "How on earth did you not know any of this?" Jake shook his head mutely, at a loss for words. His boss stared at him, frustration and confusion mingling on his face. None of them had ever seen Maya in the building, nor had they heard her name in any formal capacity. Yet here she was, greeting both the CEO and chairwoman with casual familiarity. Jake inhaled, summoning a shred of courage. This night was far from over, and it was clear he was now part of a narrative much bigger than he'd ever imagined. He stood there, his mind churning with questions. Had Maya been planning this? Was she testing him? He felt a cold sweat gathering at his temples. If he had treated Maya with more respect, things would look vastly different at this moment. Amid the night's swirling tension, Mr. Caldwell tipped to the stage, microphone in hand. The crowd quieted, expectantly looking up at their enigmatic leader. Good evening, everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to our annual gala. Polite applause followed, but it was evident most minds were still buzzing about Maya and Eleanor's presence. Mr. Caldwell continued, we have much to celebrate, new partnerships, expansions, and above all, our resilient team. His voice carried gravitas, and every ear was tuned in. Then he surprised everyone further. Before we continue with the festivities, I'd like to invite someone on stage who has been integral to our company's success. Jake stiffened, feeling Martin's eyes on him. Was Caldwell about to call him up? But Caldwell's next words erased that notion. Please join me in welcoming a quiet but powerful ally, Ms. Maya. A ripple of shock coursed through the audience. Maya stepped forward, the lights reflecting on her elegant gown. Jake's breath caught in his throat. She took the microphone, voice steady but resonant. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell, she began softly. I'm honored to be here, not just as a silent partner in this venture, but as someone who believes in innovation, empathy, and true inclusion in the corporate world. Her eyes scanned the crowd. Success isn't about grand gestures or who has the loudest voice. It's about respect for every individual and recognizing potential even when it's not wrapped in flashy packaging. Jake's cheeks burned. Was that directed at him? Polite applause followed, though many in the audience exchanged knowing looks. Maya's poise and her understated but potent words struck a chord. Jake realized she was deliberately calling out shallow judgments without naming him. The humiliation he felt was overwhelming, and he found himself wishing he could vanish among the sea of suits and gowns. When Maya finished her speech, polite applause filled the room, but there was an undercurrent of stunned silence. She stepped down, and Mr. Caldwell took over once more, praising her contributions and forecasting a brilliant future for the company. Jake felt like a bystander at his own event. Everything was happening around him, and he had no control. Soon after, Mr. Caldwell descended from the stage, weaving through the crowd until he reached Jake. Martin hovered close by, clearly uneasy. Mr. Caldwell greeted them both curtly, then fixed his gaze on Jake. I'm hearing some troubling things, Jake, he said in a low tone. Rumors about certain comments you made regarding Maya. Care to explain? Jake's stomach churned. This was every career professional's worst nightmare, being confronted by the CEO over personal matters at a public event. He stumbled over his words. It was a misunderstanding. I didn't realize, Mr. Caldwell held up a hand, silencing him. We've been considering you for a higher managerial post, but this raises concerns about your judgment. You may be good at what you do, but we value not just skills but also how our executives carry themselves, both professionally and personally. Martin cleared his throat, his expression sour. He was likely worried this fiasco would reflect badly on him, too. Caldwell's voice was calm but stern as he concluded, we'll discuss your promotion at another time, if at all. For now, focus on sorting out your personal conduct. With that, he pivoted and disappeared back into the crowd. Jake stood there, chest tight. The promotion he'd been chasing might have slipped away because of his careless treatment of Maya. The reality was stark. His ambition had driven him to dismiss the one person who truly cared about him, and now he was paying the price. Martin shook his head, muttered something about professional standards, and walked off. Jake felt the weight of the entire room's scrutiny. His carefully crafted image was unraveling, and all he could do was watch. The moment Mr. Caldwell left, Jake felt like the floor had dropped beneath him. His promotion was slipping away because of his careless treatment of Maya. He glanced around to see if he could salvage the situation, but people were whispering, moving away from him as though he carried a contagion. Sophia, too, had been observing the exchange. She approached Jake, carefully picking her words. "That looked rough," she said, voice laced with discomfort. There was no sympathy in her tone, though, rather a guarded distance. "Jake, if this tanks your career, I can't be tied to the drama." Jake's frustration flared. "So you're just going to cut me loose because I'm not shiny enough for you anymore?" She shrugged in a way that suggested she was done expending emotional energy on him. "Look, this might sound harsh, but I'm career-focused, too. And from the looks of it, you just lost the CEO's favor. If you can't fix this, you're not going anywhere but down." He wanted to lash out, but no words came. He had staked so much on the image he projected tonight, arriving with Sophia, acting like he was on the fast track. Instead, everything had imploded. Sophia pursed her lips and walked off, leaving Jake alone. He felt a mixture of anger and regret. He had chosen the shallow path, discarding Maya in the process. Now, it seemed he was reaping the bitter fruit of those choices, isolated, humiliated, and at risk of losing everything he'd worked for. Around him, partygoers had resumed their mingling, but the invisible barrier around him remained. He was a pariah for the night, stuck in a haze of consequences. Standing against the marble pillar, Jake sank into a spiral of memories. He recalled the day he first met Maya at a local cafe. She was reading a book on entrepreneurship, her nose buried in its pages. He joked about how serious she looked, and she'd laughed, offering to share her notes if he was interested. Her kindness had struck him from the start. Another memory surfaced, the time Maya stayed up all night editing his resume and prepping him for the job interview at Caldwell Enterprises. He had been anxious, convinced he wasn't qualified. She had walked him through potential interview questions, offered constructive feedback, and even brewed coffee to keep him going. Jake realized that while Maya had consistently been there for him, encouraging his ambitions, he had rarely reciprocated. He thought of countless evenings when she hinted at her own goals, excitedly mentioning a new idea or project. He brushed off her enthusiasm, too self-absorbed to care. He could almost hear her voice softly saying, "Jake, I just want to help you achieve your dreams," on those nights he doubted himself. Now, he wondered, had he ever truly asked about her dreams? The remorse weighed on him, sharper than any professional setback. For the first time, he understood that losing Maya's trust wasn't just about losing a future partner, it meant letting go of the one person who had genuinely cared about him without asking for anything in return. He looked down at the polished marble floor, tears threatening to surface. Around him, the gala continued in a swirl of laughter and clinking glasses, but he felt trapped in the emotional fallout of his choices. Lost in thought, Jake drifted through the remainder of the gala. The laughter of other guests felt distant, as though he was on the outside looking in. He hadn't seen Maya for a while, presumably she was with Eleanor or catching up with Mr. Caldwell. He didn't dare intrude on those conversations. Just when he contemplated leaving, an assistant approached, handing him a small card. "Ms. Maya asked me to give you this," she said politely, then walked away. With trembling fingers, he opened the note. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. at the Clover Coffee Shop. Let's talk if you're free. Maya." A swirl of relief and apprehension coursed through him. At least she was willing to speak to him, albeit away from prying eyes. He tucked the note into his jacket pocket, pondering what he might say. Apologies felt inadequate for everything he'd done. In a daze, he left the gala without a word to anyone else. On the ride home, he replayed the evening's events, the shock of Maya's appearance, the reveal of her ties to the company, the public humiliation. Above all, he recalled the look on Maya's face, composed yet tinged with sadness. He had to figure out how to make amends. But he also feared that she might simply be giving him a courtesy meeting. The note was brief and neutral, not hinting at forgiveness or scorn. Whether it was a second chance or a final goodbye, Jake knew he had to show up. When he finally arrived at his apartment, he walked in like a ghost, ignoring the city lights outside. He kept thinking of Maya's calm demeanor amidst the whirlwind of revelations. Resolving to face whatever might come, he set his alarm for early morning, determined not to miss the meeting. The next morning, Jake arrived at the Clover coffee shop 10 minutes early. He nervously fidgeted with his phone, scanning the menu without really reading it. At exactly 10 a.m., Maya entered, wearing a casual blazer and jeans, a stark contrast to her elegant gown from last night. Yet she still carried that quiet assurance that seemed to come so naturally. They found a small table in the corner. For a moment, neither spoke. The tension was palpable, each trying to gauge how to begin. Finally, Jake broke the silence, voice trembling with genuine remorse. "Maya, I owe you the biggest apology of my life." Maya nodded, letting him continue. He confessed how shallow he had been, how he had let corporate image and ambition overshadow what truly mattered. He admitted he was stunned by her role in the company but felt most regretful about dismissing her capabilities and personhood in public. She sipped her latte, listening intently. When Jake finally ran out of words, she exhaled softly. "Thank you for saying all that. I needed to hear it." Her tone was calm, measured. "But Jake, it's not just about the gala. This pattern of behavior, where you belittle me or push me aside, didn't start last night." Jake lowered his gaze, tears threatening to surface. Maya continued gently, "I'm moving abroad soon to launch my startup. This meeting is for closure." She looked at him sadly. "I loved you, Jake. But I can't be with someone who only values me when it's convenient." Her words landed like heavy stones. He fought the urge to plead, to beg her for another chance, but he could sense her resolve. Maya stood, adjusting her blazer. Before leaving, she placed a hand on his shoulder, whispering, "Take care of yourself. And learn from this." Her touch was light, and it lingered like an unspoken goodbye. That same evening, Jake returned to his apartment in a daze. Maya was gone from his life, likely for good. He closed the door behind him, leaning his head against the cold wood. The silence enveloped him like a heavy blanket. He drifted through the apartment, memories assaulting him from every corner, the couch where Maya once curled up beside him to read, the kitchen where they shared midnight snacks and laughter, the desk where she'd edited his resume. Every space echoed with her presence. Now, it felt empty. Jake tossed his suit jacket onto a chair and stared at his reflection in the large mirror by the hallway. He barely recognized himself. Dark circles under his eyes, a hollow expression. The once confident man who prided himself on climbing the corporate ladder looked utterly defeated. He recalled the coffee shop conversation, Maya's gentle voice, the finality in her eyes. She wasn't leaving out of spite, she was leaving because she'd outgrown the emotional constraints he placed on her. She had apologized, too, apologized for not speaking up sooner about what she needed in a relationship. The realization struck him like a thunderbolt, he had taken her quiet support for granted. Worse, he had neglected to see her as a person with her own ambitions. Now, faced with the loneliness of his empty apartment, he truly understood what he'd lost. It wasn't just a relationship, it was a partnership that could never be replaced. There, under the dim overhead light, Jake acknowledged his flaws with painful clarity. No promotion or corporate success could fill the void Maya's departure left behind. 12 months passed in what felt like a slow-motion blur. Jake continued working at Caldwell Enterprises, but his momentum stalled. Martin had retired, and a new manager oversaw Jake's department. People still respected Jake's skill set, but the upper echelons of the company viewed him with cautious neutrality rather than enthusiasm. Rumors circulated that he had once been close to a major promotion until that fateful gala night. He heard whispers in hallways, though no one spoke directly to him about it anymore. The corporate ladder no longer seemed to stretch out invitingly. Instead, it felt like a towering edifice with no clear footholds. Then one day, while on a lunch break, Jake scrolled through his newsfeed and saw a headline, "Rising tech entrepreneur Maya spearheads innovative startup," featured in Forbes. His heart thundered. The article displayed a photo of Maya standing outside a sleek new office building, smiling confidently. He devoured every word. Her company was revolutionizing a niche in software integration, partnered with major clients overseas, and employing a growing team. Bittersweet pride welled within him. Even though they weren't together, seeing her success was somehow reassuring. She had told him she was leaving to pursue her dreams, and she had done exactly that. That evening, Jake stayed at the office late, finishing a report. As he shut down his computer, he couldn't help but wonder if life would have been different had he supported Maya from the start, celebrating her ambitions instead of underestimating them. This question followed him home, echoing in the emptiness of his apartment. He realized he would never truly know the answer, but he could at least strive to become a better person moving forward. Over time, the office politics evolved. Sophia, once the rising star alongside Jake, had found herself in a complicated position. After distancing herself from Jake post-gala, she tried to secure her own promotion. However, the corporate environment had shifted under the new management, who valued teamwork and integrity over flashy displays. She still worked at Caldwell Enterprises but was no longer in the limelight. She had missed a key opportunity to align herself with supportive colleagues, and the higher-ups saw her as someone who thrived on superficial alliances. Consequently, she was passed over for the plum assignments that could have accelerated her career. Jake watched from a distance. Their relationship had cooled to polite acknowledgments in the hallway. Gone was the flirtatious banter, replaced by a mutual understanding that they'd each made mistakes. Sophia had bet on him to elevate her status, only to find herself in corporate limbo when he fell out of favor. Though Jake harbored no ill will, he felt oddly relieved that their trajectories had diverged. He was focused on improving himself, attending workshops, seeking mentorship, and learning to appreciate the people around him. Still, the corporate ladder offered him no shortcuts. He had to earn back the trust he had squandered. Sophia, for her part, seemed resigned to her new, modest role. Occasionally, Jake glimpsed her looking wistfully at the corner offices on the executive floor. In those moments, he realized how fragile ambition can be when not grounded in genuine respect and relationships. He also recognized that in some twisted way, their stories were cautionary tales, warnings about what happens when people chase status at the expense of authenticity. It was a cloudy afternoon when Jake's phone buzzed unexpectedly. He glanced at the screen, heart leaping at the name that appeared, Maya. Hesitating only a second, he opened the message. "Hey, hope you're doing well. Wanted to let you know I saw your new initiative at Caldwell. It's impressive. Proud of you. Always remember, never underestimate quiet strength." Maya. Jake felt a lump in his throat. The message was short, but every word resonated. He recalled the times he'd overlooked her potential, dismissed her quiet nature, and how she'd proven him wrong. And now, even from halfway around the world, she was extending a small olive branch of encouragement. He typed a response, trying not to overthink it. "Thank you. Your words mean more than you know. Congrats on your success, it's well deserved. Take care, Maya." Hitting send, he stared at the screen. He knew better than to expect a rekindling of what once was. Her life was moving forward, and so was his, albeit more slowly. But this final exchange felt like the closing of an old wound, a gentle push toward growth rather than regret. Jake sat at his desk, the city skyline visible through the window. He thought about everything he had learned. Quiet strength, as Maya had put it, was a force that shaped destinies. For the first time, he felt at peace. The lesson was a hard one, but it was branded into his soul. Love, respect, and humility mattered far more than hollow ambition. The end.